As mentioned, my name is Markeisha Everett. I know that you all have been talking a lot about marketing, branding, career development, the whole nine. So my plan today is just kind of walk you through my career and maybe talked about lessons learned along the way and how that fit into my personal brand. But then I want to kind of open it up to you guys to ask questions as it relates to anything I've talked about, career development, anything that's come up in class. So I'm pretty much an open book. So I'll give you my kind of quick spiel, if you will, and then hopefully we'll have some good conversations after that. So I like to start with my background, just about who I am and where I come from, because I think it'll kind of play into the personal branding deals as we're talking about it. So I am originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I did my undergrad at Bowling Green State University, went into undergrad thinking that I was going to be a sports and entertainment lawyer. Um, I had done some like work in high school with ACLU as well as some different like law firms during the summer at home, and really wanted to go into sports law. And I thought that would be kind of the career path. Once I got on campus, I got involved super early. I planned to major in pre-law with a double major pre-law and then sport management, if you will. Got into both pre-law and sport management my sophomore year. I personally thought that law was boring. It was no longer holding my interest, but I was definitely leaning towards the kind of sports marketing side and really enjoying the business aspect of it. So dropped pre-law, stayed with sports marketing, and then I just kind of volunteered everywhere throughout the athletic department, business office, facilities and operations, ticketing, so on and so forth, because I really truly was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do, but most importantly, like what I was good at, if you will. And then being from Cleveland, had its bonuses because I would work in different parts of the athletic department while I was in school at Bowling Green. But then when I went home, I had the opportunity to work for the professional teams there. So I worked, Brown's training camp one summer. I was a ticket taker for like the Cleveland Indians. So I just was, again, everywhere trying to figure out how to best get involved. My senior year, I actually did an internship at Bowling Green as well as the University of Toledo. They're about an hour away. So 3 days a week, I would drive up to Toledo. I would help with their athletic events. I would work in the office, so on and so forth. I really enjoyed my experience at University of Toledo. It was completely different than what I was doing at Bowling Green. At Bowling Green, I was really like building a relationship between the student athletes and the athletics marketing staff, just because I was closer in age. I had become friends with some of those people, that sort of thing. So a lot of what I was doing was student driven, and then bringing kind of that collaboration between the student athletes and the staff together. But when I went to the University of Toledo, they let me kind of plan out different promotions for games. And I could not only like plan it out on paper, but I could actually see it in motion. And that for me was like, I think a big difference of like, okay, this is what I want to do. Decided to go to grad school. I graduated during a recession. So all the jobs that used to be were no longer that. So it was like internship or graduate assistant. I chose the graduate assistant route. I moved to Morgantown, West Virginia. And then at that time, a lot of people do third-party rights holders now for their multimedia rights agreement. So for example, at St. Joe's, we had Ben Wagner. When I was at University of Pittsburgh, we had JMI. And then before that at Georgia Tech, like we had Learfield. So many of them out there now. But at the time, West Virginia was one of the only Power 5 schools that still did it in-house. So my role was hybrid between marketing and sponsorship. So from a marketing side, I was doing student marketing, which I've mentioned that I had some experience with, just kind of in my undergrad days, as well as working for the first time with coaches. I was assigned to the volleyball program. So building a marketing plan, working with coaches, working with student athletes, but then also working with the different entities within the athletic department to truly make things happen. So that was like bonus for me. And then from a sponsorship side, I was in charge of sponsorship fulfillment and tracking to make sure that whatever assets that we sold them, they got. So for example, if we had a deal at the time with Pepsi. Okay, if Pepsi had an email blast, a student promotion, and 3 giveaways, it was my job to make sure that I worked with the necessary people for those particular items to come alive, and then put together reports and present that back to the sponsor, if you will. So that was kind of my experience in undergrad. I left there, still in a recession because I did an accelerated program 1 year, and then I went to North Dakota State as a like postgraduate internship, if you will. NDSU, I will say, is probably one of the best brands in college football. And I know when a lot of people think about big brands in college football, they think about Alabama, Georgia, those sorts of programs. And that's not a knock to those programs when you talk about from an overall business standpoint of how you bring in money, what type of student athletes you recruit, the consistency of it all, your brand, how people relate to your brand. I would argue that NDSU is probably one of the best in the business to do it, if you will. So at NDSU, I started as kind of a similar position as West Virginia, the marketing and sponsorship. That shifted and then became marketing and hospitality. So instead of doing sponsorship deals, I was now trying to convince X corporation to come out and bring their guests and go into suites or hospitality tents or whatever it may have you. So that kind of became my deal. I didn't like the revenue piece at first. And part of that was because a lot of what I was doing was cold calling. I was on the phone, I was on the internet, I was calling people blindly, trying to sell them into something. I was good at it, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it, if you will. Had the opportunity to land my first full-time job at the University of Missouri. And then during my time at Mizzou, I went in, and at that time, it was like, I was the promotions person. I knew how to take a themed promotion like a Star Wars and blow it out. And truly get like traction with fans and that sort of thing. And that was probably my first year. And then I got a new boss, and he started to introduce me to things like branding, brand management. So then I started doing a little bit of branding and brand management as it related to sponsorships, making sure that we had brand guidelines. So how to use our logo, is there a certain type of font and typeface and that sort of thing. So that was fun. But then I got pulled back into the revenue fold, which I did not enjoy at my previous jobs, but I was willing to kind of try it out again. And I got back into it in kind of a hospitality standpoint. This time it was much different. I wasn't doing as much cold calling. I was getting warm leads from our sponsorship team, from our ticket sales team, and then I was just kind of going in and closing those deals, if you will. So I enjoyed that a lot. I actually decided that I wanted to explore the revenue side of things more. Had a friend who was working at Gonzaga University at the time, recruited me to come out to the Pacific Northwest. Went out there. Obviously, Gonzaga is a basketball school, no football. So I was a hybrid between a marketing and a sales role. I enjoyed the marketing aspect of it. The sales role became a grind that I didn't like. And it was managing a sales team. But what we would do is from 8 to 5, I would be in office, and that's my marketing role. And then from 6 to 9, I would be in the call center, and that was my sales role. And that just became like too much for me. Got a call from a previous boss and mentor at West Virginia, where I mentioned I went to grad school at. And they were like, hey, we heard you're doing really good things on the revenue side. We need somebody here to help us be more strategic with some of our resources and assets. So I agreed to go back, with the exception of I will not be actually on the phones doing phone, cold calling, that sort of thing. I know a lot of people love it. Again, honestly, I did not. So I went to West Virginia, and I was managing a in-house sales team. So I was managing about 4 people, and they were doing a cold calling, but then we outsourced. So I got a chance to do RFP for the first time. And RFP is really, putting your bid out for businesses, which company will work with you best to help you maximize on revenue extend your brand, so on and so forth. So we did that. We brought in IMG Learfield Ticket Solutions, great team, managed them. And then from the marketing side, I was working with football, men's basketball, and baseball. With baseball, we opened up a new stadium. Bob Huggins, from a men's basketball side, had a team where we were going on a run for a couple of years. Football was trying to adjust to kind of the Big 12, if you will, because they had just came from the Big East to the Big 12. They struggled their first season. They were 3-10. My second year, we were 10-3. So positive, if you will, positive things happening that made it a little bit easier for me to do my job. I enjoyed it. And then I think this is around the time where I started to develop maybe the leadership aspect of the business. Before, I had kind of the marketing, the branding, the sales, so on and so forth. But then from that personal side, it's like truly thinking about what I wanted my career to be. So I really started to hone in on the leadership aspect of it as well. The guy who oversaw, like, the general manager for our ticket solutions, him and I became really good friends, really great coworkers, worked really well together. He had a friend at Georgia Tech that was looking for somebody, introduced me, ended up being a great connection. I moved to Atlanta, start working at Georgia Tech. That was my first time being able to run my own shop. I was kind of creating the vision. I was hiring people, just things that I had not been able to do previously in my other roles. So I truly enjoyed that. But a lot of what I was still doing was still on kind of the marketing and revenue generation side of things. When I talk about revenue generations at Georgia Tech, we were looking at ticket sales as well as annual fund through our fundraising arm. Then I took a position at the University of Pittsburgh. Pitt is about 2 hours from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. So jumped on the opportunity to get back closer to home. Love what I was doing. I was overseeing marketing, licensing, ticket sales, and ticket operations in that role. But I felt like I quickly hit a ceiling of like growth opportunities there. So decided that I was going to explore the opportunity here at St. Joe's. I have been at St. Joe's for 4 to 5 months, maybe. I forget what day I started, but new to St. Joe's. And then in my role, I have a really long title that doesn't matter, but I oversee our external units. So marketing, communication, video and broadcasting, annual fund efforts, and that's one more. I oversee 5 departments. I forget what the last one is. And then I get a different experience that I want, because I haven't mentioned this before, but for me, I want to be an athletic director. So it's important for me at this stage to get experience with being a sport administrator. So I oversee sports, the sports of men's tennis and women's tennis, and then learning how to do a bigger sport like basketball, if you will. And essentially, when you're a sport administrator, you have to make sure that rosters are correct. People are eligible. They have what they need to get into school. If they're a freshman or transfer student or whatever it may have you, there's a different set of paperwork, as I like to describe it, than it is of just brainstorming, strategic planning, that sort of thing. So enjoying that a ton. But definitely different from the day-to-day kind of marketing and external stuff that I've grown up in the business doing. So I tried to kind of give how I started versus where I'm at, and just like a little bit of context. I mentioned that I was from Cleveland early on, but that's important for me because I'm a city kid and I like the city. Being in rural areas like Morgantown, West Virginia, Spokane, Washington, great jobs. But a part of the reason that they didn't work out for me is because I didn't want to be in a small town. Like, I wanted to be in the city. So if you look at, like, as I got older, you look at the stop at Georgia Tech, you look at the stop at University of Pittsburgh, and now St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. I am somebody who wants to be in a city as long as possible. I also understand that at some point, I'm going to have to go back to a small college town because I do want to become an athletic director. So I am trying to make strategic moves for like myself and my personal brand on the front end, so that I do have a little bit of flexibility once I kind of get to that like chair, if you will. So quick synopsis of like my background, kind of how I got there, what I was doing, what I learned, but opening it up for like, what questions do like you guys have for me about, like I said, my career, branding in general.
All right, I'll go. I'm gonna go back to one of the first points that you brought up, with volunteering that you said. I was just gonna ask you, do you think that's something that more people should take advantage of? Because I feel like more people are more kind of focused on like internships and part-time jobs to get more experience. But do you think volunteering is kind of like an underrated thing that people should look to get into more?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Kyle. I would say with volunteering, I always saw it as a good way to network. Maybe like that play, like for example, if you volunteer for the Final Four, um, not a guarantee that you're going to get hired with the NCAA, but you could make some connections of people that are working in the business, and you never know who they might be able to kind of connect you with. So I've always seen volunteering as a way to connect with some people outside of my day to day, that hopefully will be able to, if not find me a job, maybe at least provide some guidance. Hey, I saw this job description. I'm thinking about applying. I know that you're in this area. What would you be looking for? So then that way you kind of feel like you have a different kind of insight and perspective, than you would going into it blind, is kind of how I've always seen it.
Okay.
Then I have a question in a chat. It asks me about why I chose to go to West Virginia, and did I have any other grad assistant opportunities? Great question. So I chose West Virginia for a couple of different reasons. So at the time, it was actually between West Virginia and Florida State. I chose West Virginia because they were offering a full scholarship, one. Two, I was able to go into the athletic department in a position where I knew was going to give me real-time experience. So the opportunity to have a sport as a GA at that time was huge. Back then, being a GA was really like being the personal assistant to somebody, if you will. You were making copies, you were taking notes, like, but you weren't given the opportunity to truly go in and develop your skill set. They were allowing you to be in a room, if you will. And I knew that West Virginia would allow me to grow my skill set. So that's ultimately why I chose there over FSU at the time.
Yeah, I got a question. It sounds like a lot of your experiences have been at the college level. Just wondering, because I'm specifically looking to get into professional organizations, maybe not straight out of college, but after the fact. Just wondering what your thoughts are on the difference between college and professional.
I think the difference between college and professional is how the business model is set up. So for example, if you go to an NHL team, under their marketing department, they have marketing, social media, branding, like they have somebody that specializes in something. When you go into a college athletic department, the marketing department specializes in all of those things. And it's really about what is it that your school is looking to do. And you have to make sure that you hire and train your people to be within that. So I'll give the example of Georgia Tech and Pitt are very similar in like size, budget, that sort of thing. But the way that they wanted the marketing department to run was completely different. So at Tech, I was the revenue person. So yes, like my title was marketing, but a lot of what I did was creating sales timeline, figuring out how to generate like new leads, making connections of like people, businesses to our fundraising arm, as well as like our ticket salespeople. Going to Pitt's like, I need somebody that understands game presentation because that's heavy for us. So everybody that I brought in had to have some component of game presentation, script writing, getting on headset, being able to talk to the producer. If we're having a TV game, being able to do the timing, coordinate with their like timeout coordinator, that sort of thing. When you go to professional, if you do retail marketing, you do retail marketing. You don't have to worry about the game day production and writing scripts and that sort of thing. So I think that would probably be the biggest difference of just how that business model is made, and then the staffing that kind of goes within that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What tips would I give to somebody trying to make themselves stand out for potential GAs and grad applications? I tell people to be yourself. Tell your story, but tell it in a unique way. If everybody is like, I am so old that like people were impressed by videos submitted as an interview style when I was going to grad school. Now that's like standard operating procedure for people. So I tell people all the time, like, just tell your story, but do it in a way that's unique to you. A couple of tips that I give in general when applying for anything is, do you have a portfolio? So for example, if you're a graphic designer, do you have a digital portfolio that you could pass along the link with your information to, so they don't have to ask, is readily available to them? If you want to be on the external side of the house, so marketing, branding, revenue, fundraising, any of that stuff, I think it's important to have a digital footprint, even if it's as simple as a LinkedIn profile. Have a LinkedIn profile, basic information, any volunteer internship work, but also like have a 30-second or quick like elevator pitch about what you're looking to do. So if I was to get off of this and I was to go to your profile, I know that you're interested in facilities and operations. So I can, chat you about a facilities and operations opportunity. I can connect you with somebody that has that. So I definitely say, create a portfolio if you have one. LinkedIn, I tell people all the time, I am a person that I don't care about what you do on your social media, quite frankly. However, there are a lot of people that think different than me and they want to study your social media. So be smart, whatever that consists of for you, right? Like, be smart about it. I tell people all the time, if you know that your social media is not like professional, or if somebody professional came across it, they would have an issue with your humor or you cursing or whatever it is, lock the account. We know that like that doesn't necessarily erase it, but lock the account. It doesn't even give them the opportunity to study your social. And if you go into a job application, like a job interview, and they ask you why you have it locked, just say that it's my personal social media. That's a private account that I share with my, personal circle or whatever it may have you. And you don't have to explain kind of more beyond that. So those would be like some quick tips that I think about right away when you're applying for anything. What else you guys got? I don't think you want me to answer that question. I think it's important to go to school and pass. Understand the basic concepts of what you're doing. So if you're in a marketing class, understand the basic principles of marketing, because in my opinion, in order to add value to anything, you got to know what you're talking about, right? So if you're learning about something like the 4 Ps of marketing, right? And you go and you get a position as a marketing graduate assistant, can you then take the principles of the 4 Ps, but apply them into a real life situation? So learn the principles, pass the classes, and that's all I'll say about school. A lot of working in sport and entertainment is going to be on the job training. Can you think quickly? Can you adapt? Can you evolve? There's just going to be certain things. For example, we could talk about script writing in a class, but until you get on a headset and you're like, hey, the men's basketball team is currently up 3 points, hot timeout, 2 minutes left. We have this boring sponsorship video. You got to know how to cut it, right? Like, you got to know how to cut it to get your atmosphere, but then you got to know how to put it back in somewhere, even if it's next game, whether it's social media. Like, those are things that you can't necessarily learn until you're in the situation, because you're learning the environment, you're adapting, you're pivoting, and you're doing what's necessary. But you got to be able to go and like do those things. Like, got to understand the business enough to do those things. But again, that's not stuff that you get until you're put in those real world situations.
Okay, I have another question.
Go for it.
So in terms of like getting experience, whether it's like internships, part-time job, volunteer, whatever it is, even if you have like a specific thing that you were interested in, do you think it would be better to just get a lot of experience in that one thing, or to still get a wider scope and kind of be able to put all of them together?
I think it depends on a person. I am of the belief that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you can go to a job like compliance, knowing that you don't want to go into compliance, but you're there to kind of get the experience and you can still give it 100%, you can still learn, you can still grow, then do it. But I've also seen people like, this is the only internship I could get. I don't really want to be in compliance. And they go into it without giving it their all. The thing that I tell people is, no matter what level of sport you want to go into, rec, college, pro, agency, like whatever it might be, like everybody knows everybody. So just because you're in a compliance role and you want to be in a facilities and an event operations role, you never know who they know. So go in, give it your all. So then that way, you know that you have an advocate for you when you get ready to go and apply for that job that you actually do want. So if you could go into roles like that and give it 100%, I say get as much experience as you can where you can. But if you're one of those people and you're like, if I don't really care about it, I know I'm not going to give it 100%, go and study the area, get the volunteer work, get the internship, get the full-time jobs in the space that you actually care about, because all you're going to do is mess up your reputation if you don't go in and do what you need to do in those types of roles.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Mark.
Cameron, anything you want me to kind of hit on or I'm sorry, somebody just had a question.
Hey, sorry.
Go ahead.
Hey, so this one's kind of a two-parter. So with your experience, can you maybe talk about the difference between being in a big city and a smaller town, and being at a school with football and being at a primarily maybe basketball school or non-football school?
Yep. So when you are in Fargo, North Dakota, pretty much there's not a lot to do in terms of entertainment options, unless it's the summer months. There's a lot of outdoor kind of activities in that area, but you're what I like to call the only show in town. You're not competing with an NBA team, that sort of thing. So from a marketing and sales perspective, it's easier to get to your fan base. It's also easier to convert somebody to be in your fan base, because even if they didn't go to NDSU, it's like, you're a part of this community, you should cheer for this team. And it's a little bit of a easier sell. I would say the same thing for West Virginia. While West Virginia is not the only school in the state, it's the biggest school in the state. And a lot of our marketing, and this is the way they still operate, is geared around being prideful that you come from West Virginia, being prideful about the history of West Virginia, coal mines, hard workers, that sort of thing. So the storyline is completely different. Being in a big city market like Atlanta, where you have literally everything, you have to be very strategic about how you're reaching your fan base. So for example, a radio ad in Morgantown, that could actually sell you some tickets. A radio ad in a big city, that's not selling you tickets. It's about brand awareness at that point, right? It's more so that people know that you're there, and you have to truly be strategic about how you bring those people in. So for example, if I'm in Morgantown and I'm like, hey, we want to get more kids. We're like, launch a kids club. We've never had one of those. You get 2,000 kids that sign up out the gate without any promotion or anything. You did a press release and said, we got a kids club. It's $35. Sign your kids up, right? All of the parents who had been waiting for something as a way to introduce their kid to WVU or WVU sports, sign their kids up. You're in a city like Pittsburgh, you launch a kids club. You're like, okay, how do I get in front of youth basketball clubs or youth gymnastics, programs, that sort of thing. So you have to think about it in a different way, because the work requires probably 2 or 3 additional steps. You can identify that you, like in West Virginia, you can identify, I want to start a kids club. I want it to be 1,000 kids in the first year, right? The next step to that would be, if you're in like a Pittsburgh, I want to start a kids club. I want it to be 1,000 registrants per year. I need to reach kids ages 12 and under that are interested in basketball, gymnastics, and volleyball, or they participate in after school activities. Then you have to do the research of where are those places that make sense in our area code? And then how can I best disseminate this information to them so that they'll come out? So the difference of being in a city versus a college town is really how you go about marketing yourself. And like I said, it's just kind of that extra step, if you will. And that's not to say if you're in a college town, you don't do as much marketing, you just do a different type of marketing. In terms of a basketball versus a football school, I can tell you, I started the year, the athletic year, at a football school. I was running and producing football games before I started here. There is no football. So I can tell you one of the biggest shifts was my mindset, because I was already in go mode. I had already started my biggest sport. We had already reached the revenue goals that we needed to. We were focused on, these other kind of 3 or 4 goals. But then starting St. Joe's in September, where your basketball team starts in November, and typically they don't go on sale with anything in October, I was starting that process all over again, something that I did for football like 6 months ago, if you will. So it's the shift in mindset of like when things need to happen and how they need to happen, I would say is one of them. And then I'll say one of the lessons that I learned going from Mizzou to Gonzaga was really about how you tell the story involving the student athletes without it always being a monetary value attached to it, right? Because when I was at Mizzou, we were telling stories, but I'm telling you the story because I either need you to be a sponsor, I need you to buy a ticket, I need you to buy your hospitality tent, I need you to give to our fundraising department. With basketball, because your window of like your sales window is so long, you can tell stories without always needing to say, this is an awesome story and I need you to do this. This is an awesome story, and you have a touch point in a month where you could say, this is an awesome story and I need to do this. So I would say the timelines is different. Usually the goals are similar, but different, but it gives you a much greater window for a sales opportunity. When you're at a football school and you're in marketing and revenue generation, that's year long. People talk about like out of season. A football marketing plan has to be year long because you don't stop, because that is the engine that drives everything. When you're at a basketball school, it's like, okay, we need to be thinking, 2 to 3 months before the season, if you will, about how we're going to get these things done. And then you still kind of have the runway to get them done. You're not worried about the student athletes leaving over the summer and you need to do video shots and you need to do bios and that sort of thing, and them leaving. So that's one of the things that make it like completely different between the two. Anything else?
Just as a final wrap-up question, going along with your personal brand, what advice would you have for our students about how they can develop their personal brand now or discover what their personal brand is?
I tell people all the time, your personal brand is just you highlighting the good qualities about yourself or the good things that you could do, right? So when you talk about like an elevator pitch, when I first started in the business, my elevator pitch was like, I throw lit parties at sporting events. And as terrible as that sounds right now, I was proud of that, like 12 years ago. Like that was a thing. That's how I got people's attention. And then they'd be like, explain. And then I'm like, hey, we had a Michael Jackson night and we did, a sellout and da, da, da. So I was able to kind of talk about those things. As my brand evolved, then kind of that pitch changed, how I presented myself changed, because I wanted to be seen as a leader among the pack. I wanted to be seen as somebody who understood how marketing generates revenue. A lot of people see marketing as like, they're going to spend your money, but you're not going to get much from it, right? I took pride in being somebody who understood how marketing directly generates revenue. So with that, that's how I highlight myself. I take the things that I'm really good at, and those are the things that I sell. If you look at my Twitter account, I talk about leadership. I talk about marketing that generates revenue, because that's kind of what I want to be known as. It's not something that's, I think a lot of time when people are talking about a personal brand, it's like, how do you go and create something? You're not creating something. You're just figuring out how to amplify the qualities that you have. So if you're a problem solver, let that be a part of your personal brand. If you're somebody who can think outside of the box, let that be a part of your like personal brand. But when you think about your personal brand, I encourage people to think about, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? What is it that I want other people to know about me? And then you build that in the most authentic way possible to yourself. I use the example, I was talking to a friend at Nebraska, and we were talking about all the social media platforms and how he constantly battles with his bosses that they're not on everything. And he's like, we're not on everything because that's not our brand. It's not our brand and that's not our audience. So he knows that being on TikTok, yes, there's some opportunity for students there, but being on Instagram, they don't get as much traction. So they've decided that they're not going to focus on Instagram. They're going to do Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, because that's what fits their brand. So then I would say to you, what fits your brand? And where is your audience? So for example, for me, I tweet about random things, but most of my stuff is related to what I do professionally, because that's where I feel like my target audience is. If you go to my Instagram is locked, but it's locked because of what I told you earlier. If people are going to go to your Instagram, or they're going to go to your social media platforms, and you feel like they're going to have an issue with what they see, lock it. My Instagram is not professional. My Twitter is. That's where my audience is. So that's where I build that space, kind of at. That's kind of the advice that I would give. Be yourself. What are you good at? What do you like? Where's your audience? And kind of play into that. But then going back to the advice that I gave about applying to grad schools or positions, where's your portfolio? Where's your LinkedIn profile? Where's your digital footprint? And kind of tie some of those things into it. But don't worry about creating something. It's about where can you amplify who you are.